Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of Nexus Prime and felt the weight of 47 alien gazes upon him. The air smelled strange here, like metal and ozone mixed with something he could not name. 3 years he had been coming to this place. 3 years of sitting at tables while creatures from across the galaxy told humanity what it could and could not do. The Zephyrians floated near the center of the room, their crystal bodies catching light from the dome above. They spoke without moving their mouths, their words coming through small machines that hung in the air beside them. Today their leader, a being called Shardik, had been talking for an hour about why humans were too young to have real power in the galaxy. "Your species has been in space for only 200 years, the translation device said in its flat voice. "We have sailed between stars for 10,000 years. You are children playing with dangerous toys." Jake looked around the massive chamber. The walls curved up and up until they met in a perfect circle far above his head. Everywhere he looked, alien faces stared back at him. Some had too many eyes, some had no eyes at all. The Krathari looked like giant insects, their queen sitting on a throne made of some black metal that seemed to eat light. The hegemony delegation sat in their floating chairs, their forearms moving in patterns that Jake had learned meant they were annoyed. For 3 years, Jake had come here with proposals. Trade agreements that would help both humans and aliens. Defense pacts that would protect smaller worlds from pirates and raiders. Research partnerships that could help solve problems like disease and hunger. Every single time the Council had said no, the problem was simple. The older races did not see humans as equals. They saw them as newcomers who needed to be controlled and guided. The Council had offered humanity observer status, which meant they could watch the meetings but never vote on anything important. It meant humans could trade with other species, but only under rules the Council made. It meant humanity would always be junior partners in a galaxy run by others. "We have heard your proposals," said Chancellor Vexstar of the Hegemony. His voice was deep and rumbling, and when he spoke, his forearms moved in slow circles. Always, they show your species lacks wisdom. You think too much of yourselves. You move too fast. You change things that should not be changed." Jake had heard these words before, or ones very much like them. The Council loved to talk about tradition and stability. They loved to remind everyone how long they had been in charge and how well things had worked under their rule. What they did not like to talk about was how their rules kept most species poor and weak while a few grew rich and powerful. "The galaxy has order," continued Vexstar. "That order has brought peace for 1,000 years. Your species threatens that peace with your strange ideas and your refusal to accept your place." The Luminari representative flickered then, its body of pure energy shifting from blue to red and back again. Jake had learned that this meant the creature was agreeing strongly with what it heard. All around the chamber, other aliens were making their own signs of agreement. Clicking sounds from the Krathari, harmonic tones from the singers. Even the usually neutral Vox were humming in a way that meant they supported the Council's position. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had come here hoping that this time would be different. Captain Lisa Hayes was waiting in orbit. With the used Defiance, along with Admiral Carlos Rivera and the entire Third Fleet, they had come in peace, hoping to finally get the respect that humanity deserved. Instead, they were getting the same treatment as always. "Your final answer," Jake said quietly, "is observer status or nothing." "That is correct," Shardik replied through its machine. "Your species will accept its proper place in the galactic order, or it will have no place at all." Jake looked around the chamber one more time. He saw the Aquarian delegate in its water-filled suit, bubbles rising from its breathing apparatus. He saw the Void Runners in their dark robes, their faces hidden but their attention focused entirely on him. He saw species he had worked with. For years, beings he had thought might become friends, all of them nodding in agreement with the Council's ultimatum. "Then we are done here," Jake said. The chamber fell silent. Even the usual background noise of alien breathing and movement stopped. Every creature in the room was staring at him now. "I am sorry," Vexstar said, though he did not sound sorry at all. "Perhaps you did not understand." We are offering your species a place in galactic civilization. Without us, humanity will be alone among the stars. Jake started gathering up his papers and putting them into his case. His hands were steady, though inside he felt like screaming. 3 years of his life he had spent in this place. 3 years of trying to find common ground with beings who saw humans as nothing more than upstart children. Ambassador Morrison, Shardik machine said, you cannot simply leave. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Your species needs our protection and our guidance. No, Jake said, closing his case with a sharp click. We really do not. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, voices rose in a dozen different languages. Some were shouting, some were making clicking sounds, and some were producing tones that hurt his ears. The translator machines were working overtime, filling the air with overlapping words in human speech. This is madness, someone called out. Your species will not survive alone, another voice said. You are making a terrible mistake, a third added. Jake reached the great doors that led out of the chamber. He turned back one last time to look at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. They looked angry and confused, as if they could not believe that anyone would walk away from their generous offer. Humanity withdraws from all negotiations. Jake said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. We will find our own path among the stars. Then he walked through the doors and they closed behind him with a sound like thunder. In the shuttle bay his pilot was waiting. As they lifted off from Nexus Prime, Jake could see the lights of the council complex growing smaller below them. Soon they would dock with the Defiance and Admiral Rivera would ask what had happened. Jake would tell him that the talks had failed, just as they all had known they would. The council wanted submission, not partnership. They wanted humans to be grateful for scraps from their table, not equals sharing in the feast. As Nexus Prime disappeared behind them, Jake allowed himself a small smile. The council thought they had won by driving humanity away. They thought they had preserved their precious order and put the upstart humans in their place. They had no idea what they had just unleashed upon the galaxy. 2 years had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the council chambers, and the galaxy was starting to notice something strange happening in the Outer Rim territories. Reports came in slowly at first, just whispers from traders and merchants who traveled the far edges of known space. Human colonies were appearing in places where no sane species would try to build. Commander Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Dawn and watched another star system come into view. On his screens, this was the 15th system his team had surveyed in the past month, and like all the others, it was exactly the kind of place the council races called worthless. The star was old and dim, the planets were far from the main trade routes, and the whole system was so far out on the galactic rim that it would take months to reach civilized space using conventional drives. Looks perfect, Ryan said to his science officer, Dr. Elena Vasquez. Elena smiled as she looked at her readings. 3 planets in the habitable zone, rich asteroid fields, and enough rare metals to fund a dozen colonies. I still cannot believe. The council never bothered to claim this place. Too far from their precious trade routes, Ryan replied. They want everything close to home where they can control it. They never learned to think big. The truth was that humanity had been thinking big from the moment they left the failed talks on Nexus Prime. While the council spent their time debating regulations and arguing about ancient territorial claims, humans had been busy exploring. Admiral Rivera had divided the Third Fleet into dozens of small exploration groups, each one heading out into unexplored space to see what they could find. What they found was opportunity everywhere they looked. The galaxy was huge, much bigger than the small part of it that the council controlled. Beyond the established trade routes and ancient boundaries lay thousands of star systems that no one had ever claimed. Some were dangerous, some were empty, but many were perfect for human colonies. Dr. Elena Vasquez had made the breakthrough that made it all possible. Working in a small laboratory on the moon base at New Geneva, she had cracked the secret of quantum jump technology. Her new drives could move a ship across distances that would take other species months to travel, and they could do it in just weeks. The council races got lazy, Elena had explained to the Colonial Planning Committee. They have been using the same jump technology for thousands of years because it worked well enough for them. They never tried to improve it because they never needed to. But we do need to, so we did. The new drives changed everything. Suddenly, colonies that would have been impossible to supply and support became practical. Human ships could jump out to the rim territories, establish a new settlement, and be back to Earth in time for the next supply run. What had once been a journey of years became a trip of months. Dr. Nathan Cross had solved the other half of the problem. His new manufacturing techniques could turn raw materials into finished goods faster than anyone had thought possible. Human colony ship could land on an empty world and have basic infrastructure running within weeks instead of years. We start with automated miners and fabricators, Nathan explained to every new colonial expedition. The machines do the heavy work while the colonists focus on the important stuff like housing and food production. Within 6 months, you will have everything you need for a permanent settlement. The Terran Colonial Authority, led by Director Amanda Foster, had turned human expansion into a science. Every new colony was planned down to the smallest detail. Supply schedules, defensive positions, trade routes, and communication networks were all worked out before the first ship ever left Earth. The result was an expansion that grew faster and stronger with each passing month. We are not just throwing people at empty planets and hoping for the best, Amanda explained to a gathering of colonial governors. We are building a network, a web of human worlds that support each other and grow stronger together. The council races watched this expansion with growing alarm. Their own surveys of the rim territories had concluded that the distances were too great and the costs too high for successful colonization. They had written off huge sections of the galaxy as economically worthless. Now humans were proving them wrong and doing it in ways that made the older races look slow and stupid. When Zephyrian scouts finally made the long journey out to investigate the human colonies, they found something that shocked them. These were not the struggling outposts they had expected to find. The human settlements were thriving communities with advanced technology and strong defenses. Some of them were already bigger and more prosperous than established council worlds, but the real surprise was not what the humans had built, but who they were building it with. The galaxy was much bigger than the council had ever admitted, and it was full of species that the older races had never contacted. Some lived so far from council space that they had never even heard of the hegemony or the Zephyrians. Others had been contacted long ago, but had chosen to avoid the council because they did not like what they saw. The Ashaki were the first. Commander Troy Williams had been leading a trade expedition when his ship picked up strange signals from a system the star charts marked as empty. What he found was a civilization of reptilian beings who had been hiding from the galaxy for centuries. The Ashaki had advanced technology and rich worlds, but they had seen how the council treated its members and wanted no part of it. Your council came to us once, the Ashaki leader told Troy during their first meeting. Many generations ago, when my great-grandfather was young, they demanded tribute and threatened war if we did not submit. We chose to disappear instead. Troy had spent weeks learning about Ashaki culture and technology. What he discovered amazed him. These beings had solved problems that still challenged human science, and they had done it without any help from the council races. They had just been waiting for someone to treat them as equals instead of subjects, the human Ashaki. Trade compact was signed 3 months later. For the first time in centuries, the Ashaki opened their borders to outsiders. But not to the council races, only to humans and their allies. More contacts followed quickly. The Void Runners were nomads who lived in the empty spaces between star systems. They had incredible technology for surviving in deep space, but they had no fixed home for the council to threaten or control. The Crystal Singers were energy beings who could communicate across vast distances instantly. The Deep Ones lived in the ocean worlds that most species ignored. Each new contact brought new possibilities. The Void Runners shared their knowledge of space survival and long-range navigation. The Crystal Singers provided communication technology that made coordinating the growing human empire much easier. The Deep Ones had biological sciences that could solve problems humans had never even thought about. President Victoria Kane, speaking from the new capital city on New Geneva, announced the formation of the Free Worlds Alliance during a broadcast that reached every human colony and their new alien partners. The message was simple. Any species that was tired of Council dominance could join a partnership of equals. "We offer what the Council never could," Victoria said as the cameras recorded her words for transmission across the galaxy. "We offer respect, fair trade, and the chance to grow and prosper without bowing to ancient tyrants. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, and strong enough to support any dream we dare to chase." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within weeks, dozens of species were sending diplomatic missions to human space. Some were council members who were tired of their masters. Others were independent worlds that had been ignored or threatened by the older races. All of them were looking for something the council could not provide, a chance to be treated as equals. The council's reaction was predictably heavy-handed. They imposed trade sanctions on any world that dealt with humans. They threatened military action against what they called rebel territories. The hegemony began mobilizing their war fleets, and the Zephyrians started making speeches about restoring order to the galaxy, but intelligence reports reaching council headquarters painted a disturbing picture. Human military technology had advanced as quickly as everything else about their civilization. Their new allies brought their own weapons and defenses to the partnership. The Free Worlds Alliance was not just a trade organization, it was becoming a rival power that could challenge Council supremacy. Admiral Kevin Murphy, now commanding the combined human fleets, sent a message to the Council that was broadcast on every communication channel in the galaxy. His words were simple and direct. "You chose this path when you refused to treat us as equals. Do not start a war you are not prepared to finish." The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. The first sign that everything was changing came when the Meridian Trade Consortium announced they were switching to human shipping partners. For 300 years, the consortium had been one of the Council's most reliable supporters, moving goods between the core worlds and paying their taxes without complaint. Now they were breaking contracts with hegemony merchants and signing deals with human freight companies. Captain Troy Williams watched the loading docks at Meridian Station and tried not to smile too widely. His ship, the New Horizons, was taking on cargo that would have gone to Council vessels just 6 months ago. The reason was simple. Humans offered better deals, faster shipping, and treated their customers like partners instead of subjects. "Your people are quite different from what we expected," said Station Master Kelver, a tall insectoid being whose species had been council members for over 1,000 years. "The hegemony merchants always acted like they were doing us a favor. By taking our business, you act like you are grateful for it?" Troy nodded as he watched his crew secure the last cargo containers. "We are grateful. Good business partners are hard to find, and we do not take them for granted." What Troy did not mention was that the New Horizons was not just a merchant vessel. Hidden behind false bulkheads were sensor arrays that could map entire star systems, and communication equipment that could reach human space instantly. Every trade run was also a scouting mission, gathering information about Council territories and making contacts with species that might be interested in joining the Alliance. The intelligence Troy and others like him gathered painted a picture of a galaxy that was far from the stable paradise the Council claimed to rule. Many species were unhappy with their treatment but had never dared to speak up. Others had tried to leave the Council in the past, only to face economic blockades or military intervention. Fear, not loyalty, kept most of the galaxy in line, but fear only worked when people believed you were strong enough to enforce your threats. The rapid expansion of the Free Worlds Alliance was making many species wonder if the Council was really as powerful as they claimed to be. The breakthrough came when Captain Susan Hill made contact with the Ashaki Deep Space Fleet. Her exploration ship, the Pathfinder, had been mapping systems near the galactic edge when they detected massive energy signatures moving through the void. What they found were ships unlike anything in Council records. Sleek vessels that moved faster than anything humans had built. The Ashaki commander, a being called Sektar, agreed to meet with Susan in the neutral space between their territories. What happened next changed everything. "We have been watching your species," Sektar told Susan as they met aboard his flagship. "Your expansion, your treatment of other races, your conflict with the Council, we are impressed." The Ashaki had been hiding from galactic civilization for centuries, but they had not been idle. Their technology was advanced beyond anything the Council possessed, and they had been exploring regions of space that other species considered impossible to reach. More importantly, they had been in contact with dozens of races that the Council had never heard of. "The galaxy is much larger than your Council admits," Sektar explained. "Beyond their small sphere of influence lie thousands of species and millions of worlds. Most of them know about the Council, and most of them want nothing to do with it." The Human-Ashaki Alliance was signed 3 weeks later, and it included provisions that made the Council's worst fears come true. Not only would the Ashaki share their advanced technology with humanity, they would help humans make contact with the hidden civilizations beyond the galactic rim within months. Human diplomats were meeting with species that had technologies the Council could barely imagine. The Void Runners could manipulate space and time, allowing them to travel between stars without using conventional drives. The Crystal Singers could communicate instantly across any distance, making them perfect coordinators for large-scale operations. The Deep Ones had mastered biological engineering to a degree that let them adapt to any environment. Each new alliance made the free worlds stronger and gave them capabilities the Council could not match. More importantly, each new member brought stories of Council arrogance and threats that had driven them away from galactic civilization. President Victoria King found herself hosting diplomatic missions from across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for millennia were working together under the Alliance banner, united by their shared desire to be free from Council dominance. "We are not building an empire," Victoria explained to the Alliance Council during one of their regular meetings. "We are building something better. A galaxy where every species can grow and prosper without fear, where strength comes from cooperation instead of conquest." The Council's response grew more desperate with each passing month. They increased their military patrols and imposed harsher penalties on worlds that traded with Alliance members. They began making speeches about the need to preserve galactic order and the dangers of letting younger races gain too much power. Some Council members even suggested launching a preemptive strike against human space before the Alliance became too strong to defeat, but the intelligence reports reaching Council headquarters told a different story. Alliance military technology was advancing rapidly, and their new allies brought weapons and defenses that Council scientists did not understand. Human shipyards were producing vessels at a rate that defied every economic model the Council had. And they were doing it with resources from worlds the Council had never known existed. Admiral Kevin Murphy stood on the bridge of the UES Sovereign and reviewed the latest strategic reports. The Alliance now controlled over 200 star systems and had formal treaties with 70 different species. Their combined fleet was larger than anything the Council could assemble, and it was growing stronger every day. "They are scared," his intelligence chief, Commander Lisa Hayes, reported. "Council communications are full of panic. They are realizing that they cannot stop us with threats anymore." The tipping point came when the Vegan Republic announced they were leaving the Council to join the Alliance. The Vegans were one of the oldest Council members, a species that had been part of galactic civilization since its beginning. Their departure sent shockwaves through the established order and triggered a wave of defections that the Council could not stop. Species after species announced they were withdrawing from Council authority. Some joined the Alliance immediately, others declared independence and asked for Alliance protection. The Council's carefully maintained order was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Chancellor Vexstar of the Hegemony called an emergency session of the remaining Council members. The great chamber on Nexus Prime was half empty now, with many seats vacant where former allies once sat. The beings who remained looked frightened and angry, like rulers who had suddenly realized their empire was built on sand. "The humans have poisoned the galaxy against us," Vexstar declared, his forearms waving in agitation. "They offer false promises of equality and freedom, but what they really want is to replace us as the dominant power." The Zephyrian representative, Shardik, flickered with colors that showed deep concern. "Perhaps we made an error in rejecting their initial diplomatic overtures. They seem to have capabilities we did not anticipate." "It is too late for regrets," the Krathari Queen clicked through her translator. "The question now is whether we fight or surrender. If we do nothing, they will eventually control the entire galaxy." The debate that followed lasted for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Council would mobilize every ship they could gather and launch a massive assault on Alliance territory. They would crush the human rebellion before it could spread further, and they would make an example that would keep other species in line for centuries to come. The war declaration was broadcast across the galaxy, announcing that Council forces would restore order to the rebel territories. Any species that continued to support the Alliance would be considered enemies of galactic civilization and would face the full might of the Council's military power. Admiral Murphy's response was broadcast just hours later. Standing before the combined flags of the Alliance members, he delivered a message that was heard on every world in the galaxy. "For thousands of years, the Council has ruled through fear and intimidation. They have kept most of the galaxy poor and weak while they grew rich and powerful. They have stifled progress, crushed innovation, and prevented countless species from reaching their full potential." Murphy paused, letting his words sink in across the watching galaxy. "Today they have chosen war rather than accept that their time is over. So be it. The Free Worlds Alliance will defend itself and its members against any aggression, but we will not stop there. We will liberate every world that wants to be free, and we will build a galaxy where every species can live with dignity and hope." As the transmission ended, Alliance fleets began moving to defensive positions throughout their territory. The greatest war in galactic history was about to begin, and everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The war began at a human research station called Outpost 7, a small facility on the edge of Ashaki space where scientists were studying alien technology. Commander Ben Parker was reviewing supply reports when the proximity alarm started. Screaming. Through the station's viewports, he could see hegemony warships dropping out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging for an attack. "All hands to battle stations," Ben announced over the station's communication system. "This is not a drill." The assault was meant to be quick and overwhelming. 200 Council ships against a single research station with minimal defenses. The Council commanders expected to destroy the facility within minutes, sending a clear message about the price of defying their authority. What they found instead was a fight that would be remembered for generations. Ben had been a military officer before becoming a station commander, and he knew that Outpost 7 could not win a direct battle against such overwhelming odds. But winning was not the only option. The station's experimental communication array could reach Alliance headquarters instantly, and its sensor network could provide detailed intelligence about Council fleet movements and tactics. "Send everything to command," Ben ordered his communications. Officer, as enemy fire began to impact the station's shields. "Fleet positions, weapon signatures, tactical patterns, everything. Make sure our people know what they are facing." The battle lasted 6 hours. Outpost 7's defenses held longer than anyone had thought possible, giving the research staff time to evacuate their most important work and transmit crucial data to Alliance scientists. When the station finally fell, it had cost the Council 30 ships and given the Alliance intelligence that would prove invaluable in the battles to come. General Patricia Ward received the news at Alliance military headquarters on New Geneva. She had been expecting the attack for weeks, and her forces were already moving to defensive positions throughout Alliance space, but the loss of Outpost 7 and its crew hit her hard. These were people she had trained and worked with, and now they were gone because the council could not accept change. "They want a war," Patricia told her staff officers as they gathered around the holographic display table. "Then we will give them one they will never forget." The council had made their plans based on what they thought they knew about human capabilities. They expected to face the same species that had walked away from negotiations 3 years earlier, a single race with limited resources and no real allies. What they found instead was a military force that had learned from every conflict in galactic history and had adapted those lessons to their own unique strengths. Admiral Kevin Murphy commanded the Alliance fleets from his flagship, the UES Sovereign. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, coordinating the movements of ships from dozens of different species. The sight would have seemed impossible just years earlier, but now it felt natural. Humans, Ashaki Void Runners, Crystal Singers, and dozens of other races working together as a single force. "Council fleet movements confirmed," reported Commander Lisa Hayes from her position at the tactical console. "3 major battle groups moving toward our outer colonies. They are following standard hegemony doctrine, massed formations with heavy cruisers in the center and lighter ships providing screening." Kevin studied the tactical display and smiled grimly. "They are fighting the last war, not this one. Signal all units. Initiate dispersal pattern Alpha. Let them chase shadows while we hit them where they do not expect it." The first major battle took place in the Kepler system, where a council force of over 300 ships encountered what they thought was a small Alliance patrol. The council commander, Admiral Ziegler of the Hegemony, ordered his ships to attack in the traditional formation that had served his people for centuries. Heavy ships in the center, lighter vessels on the flanks, overwhelming firepower concentrated on a single point. What happened next defied everything the council thought they knew about space combat. The Alliance ships did not try to meet the attack head-on. Instead, they scattered in all directions, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the Council's heavy weapons while striking at weak points in the enemy formation. Commander Ben Parker, who had survived the destruction of Outpost 7 and been given command of a new ship, led one of the Alliance strike groups. His vessel, the UES Retribution, was smaller and faster than the Council heavy cruisers, but it carried weapons that could punch through their shields at close range. "Remember what we learned at the Academy," Ben told his crew as they approached. Their target. The Council builds their ships like fortresses, all armor and guns but not much speed. We are wolves hunting elephants. Hit hard, hit fast, and get out before they can respond. The Retribution and its squadron mates struck at a Council cruiser group, crippling 2 ships and damaging 3 others, before disappearing back into the asteroid field where the larger enemy vessels could not follow. Similar attacks were happening throughout the battle zone as Alliance forces used tactics that no Council commander had ever faced, but the real game-changer was the technology that Alliance scientists had developed during their expansion into the Outer Rim. Dr. Elena Vasquez's quantum jump drives allowed Alliance ships to appear anywhere on the battlefield without warning. The Void Runners contributed stealth technology that made ships nearly invisible to conventional sensors. The Crystal Singers provided communication systems that let Alliance commanders coordinate their forces with perfect precision. The Battle of Kepler lasted 3 days and ended with the complete destruction of Admiral Ziegler's fleet. Less than 50 Council ships escaped, and most of those were badly damaged. The Alliance lost only 30 vessels, and most of their crews were rescued by search and rescue teams. News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than the Council could suppress it. Species that had remained neutral began to reconsider their positions. More importantly, Council member worlds began to question whether their rulers were really as invincible as they claimed to be. The pattern repeated itself in battle after battle. Council forces, confident in their numerical superiority and traditional tactics, found themselves outmaneuvered by enemies who refused to fight by the established rules. Humans had studied every major conflict in galactic history, learning from the mistakes and successes of countless civilizations. When combined with their natural adaptability and their allies' unique capabilities, this knowledge made them nearly unbeatable. Captain Susan Hill distinguished herself at the Battle of Proxima Gate, where she led a combined human Ashaki fleet against a Council stronghold. Using Ashaki biotechnology and human tactical doctrine, her forces penetrated defenses that had been considered impregnable for over 1,000 years. The psychological impact of these defeats was even more devastating than the military losses. The Council had ruled through the belief that they were superior to all other races, that their age and experience made them unbeatable. When that belief was shattered, their entire system of control began to collapse. Rebellions erupted on dozens of Council worlds as local populations realized that their masters were not as powerful as they had claimed. The Terran Colonial Authority, now led by Director Amanda Foster, provided support and supplies to these rebel movements while maintaining that the Alliance was not trying to conquer anyone. "We do not want to rule the galaxy," Amanda explained. In broadcasts that reached rebel-held territories across Council space, "We want to free it. Every world that chooses independence will have Alliance support, but the choice must be their own." The Council's response grew increasingly desperate. They began using weapons that had been banned for centuries, targeting civilian populations and destroying entire colonies to make examples of rebels. These atrocities only increased support for the Alliance and drove more species to join the rebellion. President Victoria Kane addressed the Alliance Council in an emergency session as reports of Council war crimes flooded in from across the galaxy. The chamber was packed with representatives from over 100 species now, many of them refugees from Council oppression. "They are showing their true nature," Victoria said as she looked out at the diverse gathering. "For thousands of years, they maintained control through fear and intimidation. Now that their power is threatened, they have abandoned even the pretense of civilized behavior." The tide of war continued to turn in the Alliance's favor. Council fleets that had seemed invincible just months earlier were being destroyed or captured at an alarming rate. More importantly, entire species were switching sides as they realized that the Alliance offered something the Council never could: genuine partnership and respect. The breaking point came when the Zephyrian home fleet defected en masse, joining the Alliance and bringing with them detailed intelligence about Council military capabilities and strategic plans. The Zephyrians had been among the Council's most loyal supporters, and their betrayal sent shockwaves through the remaining Loyalist forces. Admiral Murphy stood on the bridge of the Sovereign and watched as former Council ships took their positions in Alliance formations. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just years earlier, but now it represented the new reality of galactic politics. Signal from Alliance Command. The surrender came not with a massive battle or a dramatic confrontation, but with a simple transmission from Nexus Prime, Chancellor Vextar of the Hegemony. His forearms trembling with exhaustion and defeat appeared on screens throughout Alliance space to announce that the Council was ready to discuss terms for ending the war. Admiral Kevin Murphy received the message aboard the UES Sovereign as his fleet maintained position just outside the Nexus system. Around him, ships from dozens of Alliance member species waited to see how this final chapter would unfold. The war had lasted less than 2 years, but it had changed everything about how the galaxy was organized. "They want to meet at the old Council chambers," Commander Lisa Hayes reported as she reviewed the surrender terms. "Same place where Ambassador Morrison walked out 3 years ago." Kevin allowed himself a small smile at the irony. "Signal President Kane and let her know that the Council is ready to face reality. Also send word to all Alliance members that the war is effectively over." President Victoria Kane arrived at Nexus Prime aboard the diplomatic vessel New Geneva, accompanied by a delegation that represented the full diversity of the Alliance. Humans worked alongside Ashaki diplomats, Crystal Singer mediators, and representatives from dozens of other species that had joined the fight for galactic freedom. The Great Chamber, where Jake Morrison had once stood alone, now hosted a very different kind of meeting. The seats that had once been filled with arrogant Council members were mostly empty. Many species had already switched sides during the war, while others had retreated to distant systems to avoid the fighting. Only a handful of die-hard loyalists remained to represent what was left of the old order. Victoria stood at the same podium, where human diplomats had once begged for recognition, and looked out at the assembled delegates. The chamber felt smaller, now less impressive. The beings who had once seemed so powerful and intimidating now looked tired and defeated. 3 years ago, Victoria began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, humanity came to this place seeking partnership and equality. We were told that we were too young, too aggressive, and too different to have a voice in galactic affairs. We were offered the choice between submission and isolation. She paused, letting her words sink in. In the seats before her, the remaining council members shifted uncomfortably. Chancellor Vexstar's 4 arms were folded tightly across his chest, while Shardik of the Zephyrians flickered with colors that showed deep shame. We chose a third option, Victoria continued. We chose to prove that the galaxy could be better than what you offered. We chose to show that cooperation could triumph over dominance, that innovation could overcome stagnation, and that hope could defeat fear. The terms of surrender that Victoria presented were not what anyone had expected. The Alliance could have demanded tribute, territory, or the complete destruction of the old council system. Instead, they offered something that shocked the galaxy: forgiveness and partnership. The war is over, Victoria announced. But we are not here to replace one tyranny with another. Every species in this galaxy, including those who fought against us, will have the opportunity to join the new galactic order as equals. No one will be forced to submit, and no one will be excluded because of past mistakes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had expected to be punished for their loyalty to the Council found themselves welcomed into the Alliance with open arms. Worlds that had been devastated by the fighting received immediate aid and assistance for rebuilding. Former enemies were invited to contribute their knowledge and experience to the new galactic government. Some Council loyalists accepted the offered partnership immediately, recognizing that the old ways had failed and that the Alliance represented their best hope for the future. The Aquarians, who had remained neutral through most of the war, became some of the Alliance's strongest supporters once they saw how former enemies were being treated. Others found it harder to accept the new reality. The core hegemony worlds, led by species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia, struggled with the idea that they were now just one voice among many. Some chose to retreat to isolated systems on the galactic rim, clinging to the dream that they might someday restore their lost empire. Let them go, Victoria told the Alliance Council when some members suggested forcing the holdouts to join. We will not become what they were. Any species that wants to leave in peace may do so, and any that wants to return will be welcomed. The transformation of galactic civilization happened faster than anyone had thought possible. Trade routes that had been controlled by council monopolies were open to all species. Scientific research that had been restricted to approved institutions became a collaborative effort involving thousands of worlds. The exploration of unknown regions, which had been forbidden under council law, became a joint venture that pushed the boundaries of known space. Ambassador Jake Morrison, the man who had walked out of the council chambers and started the chain of events that led to this moment, found himself in an unexpected position. The Alliance elected him as their first Secretary General, making him the closest thing the new galactic order had to a single leader. I never wanted this job, Jake confided to Admiral Murphy during the inauguration ceremony. 3 years ago, I just wanted humanity to be treated with respect. Kevin chuckled as they watched the diverse crowd of beings celebrating in the streets of New Geneva. You got what you wanted, and a lot more besides. The question now is what we do with it. The first session of the Galactic Assembly was held on New Geneva rather than Nexus Prime, symbolizing the complete break with the old system. Representatives from over 300 species and 1,000 worlds gathered to write the charter for a new kind of galactic government. Jake stood before the assembly and looked out at a sight that would have been impossible under the old council system. former enemies sat next to each other, working together on committees and sharing ideas. Species that had been enemies for centuries were finding common ground. Young races that had never been allowed to speak were contributing ideas that amazed their elders. "We gather here not as conquerors and conquered," Jake said as he opened the first session, "but as partners in building something better than what came before." The old galaxy was ruled by fear and division. The new galaxy will be built on hope and cooperation. The charter that emerged from months of debate and negotiation was unlike any governing document in galactic history. Instead of concentrating power in the hands of a few elder races, it distributed authority among all member species according to their population and contribution to the common good. Instead of maintaining the status quo, it encouraged innovation and exploration. Instead of keeping species isolated and suspicious of each other, it promoted cultural exchange and mutual understanding. Not every problem was solved immediately. There were still conflicts between species with long histories of rivalry. There were still worlds that struggled with poverty and underdevelopment. There were still dangers from unknown regions of space and threats from hostile alien civilizations. But for the first time in galactic history, these challenges were being faced by a united civilization rather than a collection of competing powers. When the void wraiths emerged from the dark matter clouds beyond the galactic edge, they faced not the divided and suspicious galaxy of the past, but a unified alliance that could coordinate the defense of thousands of worlds. When the crystal plague threatened to destroy all silicon-based life forms, the solution came from collaboration between human biochemists, Ashaki biotechnicians, and researchers from a dozen other species working together. Problems that might have taken the old council decades to address were solved in months through shared knowledge and cooperative effort. 5 years after the war ended, Jake Morrison stood in his office in the Alliance headquarters and looked out at the city of New Geneva. The streets were filled with beings from across the galaxy, all of them living and working together in ways that the old council had claimed were impossible. A soft chime indicated an incoming message, and Jake activated his communication screen to see Admiral Murphy calling from the exploration ship Horizon. Kevin's vessel was leading the largest deep space expedition in galactic history, mapping regions beyond the traditional boundaries of known space. "We have made contact with another galaxy cluster," Kevin reported, his voice filled with excitement. "Dozens of civilizations, some of them more advanced than anything we have seen before. They want to know about our alliance and how we unified so many different species." Jake smiled as he listened to his old friend's report. "Tell them they are welcome to visit and see for themselves. The galaxy is big enough for everyone, and it keeps getting bigger." As the transmission ended, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that day when he walked out of the council chambers. Humanity had been offered a choice between submission and isolation, and they had chosen to create something entirely new. The galaxy had paid for the council's arrogance, but not in the way the old rulers had feared. Instead of conquest and destruction, the price had been transformation and growth. Instead of human dominance, the result had been genuine equality for all species. Instead of the stagnant empire of the council,